Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the While You Walk podcast. Today's big question: what would it take for you to break through your biggest obstacles and fully align your actions with the vision you have for your life today? Just a couple of beach bums on the podcast today. Introducing Jairek Robbins, one of the most sought after performance coaches in the world. Jairek and his wife Amanda co-founded Performance Coach University, where they have taught people all over the world. Jairek is also an attempting surfer, as we were just joking about, a South African conservationist, and they've built a couple schools in Uganda and Puerto Rico, all while prioritizing his life around his relationships with his wife and son. Jairek, how you doing?
Those schools were definitely in China and somewhere over in Asia. But it sounds inspiring. Puerto Rico sounds cool.
Well, didn't
Uh,
Amanda just do something in Puerto Rico with the wildlife or the wild something?
there's an orphanage nearby that we partnered with a family that's our friends, and we brought them a whole Christmas party. And then I'm looking into what it would take to adopt the whole orphanage financially and make sure they have all the supplies, clothes, food, shelter, education, anything they need. Um, but no, we haven't quite built them a school here yet.
Wow. Well, that's still
It'll be
pretty
fun though.
cool. Yeah. Jared is also the author of the book Live It, Achieve Success by Living with Purpose. Jared, I'd like to thank you and your wife, Amanda, for not only inspiring, but also supporting our dream to move to the beach. I don't think we could have done it without you guys. Thank you so much.
You're
Um,
welcome.
Today, I'd like to ask you about the power of coaching. And I took all of my coaching notes from Performance Coach University and I ran them through the AI. And I said, can you summarize Performance Coach University? Performance Coach University equips coaches with tools to empower clients through self-discovery, accountability, and measurable action plans. It emphasizes overcoming limiting beliefs, leveraging intrinsic motivation, and aligning actions with core values for transformative results. The program integrates practical strategies like storytelling, emotional engagement, and resilience building to create a lasting impact. It fosters clarity, purpose, and growth in every stage of life. How's that sound?
Sounds wordy but cool. Uh, the simplest way I explain it to people is, generally speaking, every person I've ever sat with, I just ask them, "What is it that you would like to achieve?" And some people go, I don't know, just have a good life, or I guess I'd like to take my family on a trip, or I'd like to, build my spouse their dream home together, or I'd like to just have something. Even if it's box seats at your favorite sports game, it's something that you want. And I always say, okay, cool. So we know what you want, and how far away are you currently from the thing you want? And they go, well, I don't have it right now. Well, that's fair, but are you a month away from it? Are you 30 days from it? Are you 3 years from it? How far out are you? And they'll just estimate. They'll, I'm 12 months away from being able to do that. Cool. And I'll ask them, what's the obstacle? What's the thing in your way? And a lot of people tell me, well, there's nothing in the way. I just have to keep going. Well, if there wasn't anything in the way, if there's no obstacle, that you'd already have the thing you want. You don't have what you want, therefore there's something between you and it. Well, I just need enough time and consistency. Cool, don't we all? So time and consistency is the thing in your way. It's 12 months. All you got to do is do nothing for 12 months. And they're like, no, 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 I got to do something. Okay, cool. What do you got to do for 12 months if you actually want that result? And I said, write this down. Little things done consistently over long periods of time lead to massive results. And they go, well, and this is where coaching comes in, where we start talking about what actually has to happen between where you are and the goal you want. And what's the strategy we have to overcome the outcome that's in the way, or the obstacle that's in the way. And when we start doing that kind of strategic thinking and conversation, it becomes very simple. It's like, well, if it's $3,650 for the seats, I've got to start putting away X amount of dollars per day for the next 365 days, and then boom, I got my seats. Or if it's $5,000 to buy your spouse their dream house decoration or whatever they want, Cool, start saving. It's simple. But then the fun part comes into how do you get someone to follow through? How do you get them to stay consistent with that? Because people like to tell us stories. Like, I'm really consistent. It's just on the weekends I like to enjoy my life a little. That's not consistent. And I'll give you a metaphor to think about. Imagine boarding a plane and the captain comes on and says, I'm pretty consistent. I land the plane most of the time. You'd be like, excuse me? No, that's not okay. I need a pilot that lands the plane all the time. I'm not going to risk my life and my family's life on someone that lands the plane some of the time or most of the time and, just kind of doesn't really land the plane on the weekends. Yeah, that's a hit or miss. Sometimes we crash, sometimes we don't. No way. I'm getting off that plane. Same thing. Most people have a weird story in their life they use to justify the thing they're doing that consistently derails all the progress they're trying to make. And so we find that story. We talk about it. And we try to apply it to other parts of life. Imagine going to a doctor and something feels a little off. And they take the blood test and the samples and the saliva and they run all the labs. And the doctor comes in and holds up all the information and goes, huh. And you go, what is it? He goes, I don't know, but puts his hand on you and goes, you look good to me. I think you're fine. What the hell you mean you think I'm fine? What did the report say? He goes, I don't know how to read any of that. I just go through the motions, but you look good. I'm sure you're okay. No way. I want a doctor that knows how to read the report. I want a doctor that understands what's actually going on and can give me clear insight on one thing I can do differently to get the results moving in the right direction. Same thing. Do you understand the key metrics of your own life? Do you understand what your report looks like every week? Do you even have a report that tells you how you're doing? Are things getting better or worse? Give you a different analogy, something to think about. If you're in business, if I told you there was a business, great business, it did $50 million in profit this year, I'd pause. Is this a good business or a bad business? Everyone has an opinion. That's bad. I want a bigger one. That's great. That's huge. Here's the truth. We don't know unless we have something to compare it to. If last year it did 100 million in profit and this year it did 50, something's going in the wrong direction. And we found out the year before. So 2 years ago it did 200 million, last year 100 million in profit, this year 50. I don't think this is a good business. It's going the wrong direction. Versus if 2 years ago it did 5 million and last year it did 25 million and this year it did 50 million, whew, jackpot. We got the one going in the right direction. So then I ask you a crazy question. Which direction is your health going? If I look back 2 years ago, what would your metrics be? What are the most important measurements that regard your health, your heart health, your lungs, your internal organs, your blood work, your hormones? What are the most important metrics of your health, and what did they look like 2 years ago? What about last year? What about this year? Are you trending up or trending down? Are you getting healthier or getting sicker? To give you another analogy, in relationships, I remember my uncle went to an event, and at the event they asked everyone, give your relationship a rating, 0 to 10. 10, extraordinary, can't be any better. 0, disaster. How's your relationship doing? And he was so excited. He was smiling and kind of winking and doing all the cutesy stuff at my aunt, and he wrote down an 8. He said, room for improvement, but we're doing real well. And then she wrote down a number. And, they said, now share it with your significant other. And he goes, honey, you go first. I want to see how we're doing. And she turned over her tablet. It said 3. He was floored. 3? I mean, he looked like someone straight punched him in the guts. He goes, what do you mean a 3? Are you joking? Are you messing with me? She goes, no, I feel like it's a 3. How do you think we're doing? And what's interesting, He thought they were doing an 8. He thought they were great. So the question is, in your relationship, how are you doing? Give you another analogy to think about. Let's say you have a bank account and you have an accountant. You called your accountant and you said, hey, how are my bank accounts looking? And they say, well, my gut tells me they're doing pretty good. Like, I don't give two tarts what your gut thinks. I want to know the measurement. Is there more money in it today than yesterday? And is it consistently going up? I don't care what gut feeling you have about my bank account. I care what the actual numbers are. Now, I'd go out on a ledge and say your relationship's probably more important than your bank account. But for some reason, many of you are using the gut feeling method on how you're actually doing. It's ridiculous. Absolutely insane. Asinine. How's your relationship doing? I think it's good. How do you know? Gut feeling. Are you shitting me? You would flip out if your accountant said that to you. Let me give you a different. Let's say you're boarding the airplane. You're taking your family on a ski trip. As you're getting on board, you say, pilot, do we have enough fuel? Do we have enough fuel in the tank to safely get from here to the next place we're going to land? And he goes, my gut tells me we'll probably be good. Again, pilot, I don't care what your gut says. I care what the measurement on the panel says. Do we have enough fuel or not? Like I said, how's your relationship doing? Are you winning or losing? Are you moving in the right direction or not? It's very clear if you measure. But most people don't want to measure, truthfully, because they don't want to see what's actually going on. Most people are afraid of reality. So they spend hours and hours and hours a day TikToking and Tindering and tweeting and doing all this stuff to distract themselves than what's real. Give you a clue. You can't improve that which you're not willing to measure. So there's little stuff we do. None of it's complicated. But we just figure out how to put these little things in place that give us optics on what's real. Once we have optics on what's real, we get clear on how we want to adjust it. Once we know that, we build a strategy of what we're going to do to overcome the obstacle that's in our way. We follow through, stay consistent, and results speak for themselves.
Well, so that's the coaching process.
Part of it.
Having coached so many people for 20 years, a lot of high performers doing a lot of cool things. What have you learned from them?
Everything.
What sticks
Lots
out?
of stuff.
Um, well, having that experience, working with these guys, having that perspective, and having to get to know so many people so deeply, and seeing people work through these challenges, is there something that you would know from your experience that no one else would have the opportunity to learn, to see?
Not that I'm aware of. I would have to sit with someone and help them fill in the gaps. A lot of the work I do is helping people fill in the gaps. It's sitting with people and observing all the pieces they've already figured out and then figuring out what's the thing you're still working on. What's the thing that isn't the way? I know you're great in your health or you're awesome in your business, your relationship's flourishing, but there's some part of your life that normally you're trying to figure out. And I'll give you an example. There was a gentleman who reached out for coaching. He was interested, and he told me he was one deal away from becoming a billionaire in his personal net worth. I said, cool, congrats. And I read an article about him online, and this guy was fanatical about his health, dialed in, waking up early, 100 plus supplements a day. He had his cold plunge and his sauna and all the tech tools and this amazing stuff to stay unbelievably healthy. And I said, okay, his business is dialed in, his health is fanatically, dialed in. I just looked at him. I said, how's your relationship doing? And he looked at me. He goes, don't tell anyone, but it's kind of falling apart. And I said, I could have guessed. He said, why would you say that? I said, generally speaking, at this stage of life, he's in his 30s, 40s, there's three things that usually take us out. It's either a heart attack, a divorce, or bankruptcy. Either our business goes sideways and it kind of screws us up and we go bankrupt, or our health gets funky and we end up accidentally stressing ourselves out and having a heart attack, or we're so busy working and working out that we don't pay attention to our spouse and the relationship falls apart. Usually some combination of those. And I said, so your business is great, your health is awesome. I just took a guess that your relationship's probably bumpy. And he goes, yeah, it's bad. It's ending. It's like, oof, ouch. And so I see these patterns, and the patterns I've noticed, generally speaking, 35 to 55-year-old entrepreneurial, mostly men, women too, they'll go through the same stuff nowadays. But this group of people have the same challenges. And the challenges are their health, their relationship, and their business. And so when you start to dig into those categories, my question was, what works? I went and found people in the relationship category like John and Julie Gottman, who did 35 years of research on 3,000 couples and whittled it down to 7 things. If these things are present in a relationship, it works. If they're not present, it falls apart. Done. We don't have to guess. They nailed it. Research. It's very clear and apparent. If you do these 7 things, it works. If you don't, it falls apart. Like, okay, cool. How do we build those 7 habits into regular patterns in people's lives? Wealth building, financial building. I was talking to my dad the other day, and we were laughing because people are pissed at old white rich men. There's this phrase people like to use, and they're so angry about it. And I've talked with a bunch of these people who have absurd amounts of money. None of them are special. I have a phrase I like to use. I was just at a conference last week in Houston, and everyone on stage is talking about they manage $20 billion or $100 billion or $250 billion worth of capital. And I always look at these people, and I don't mean to be judgmental, but I look at them, and I'm like, if they could figure that out, they're no smarter than me. And that's not because I have an ego. I'm just listening to them. I watched where they went to school, their background, their education, how they got there, their path per se. None of it's special. They just figured out math. They sat down and did math in a spreadsheet. They're like, if I put X in and it compounds Y amount over X amount of years, it produces Z. That's it. And then the crazy part is the ones specifically in that room aren't just the ones who ran the spreadsheet. They're the ones who, for the last 40 years, stuck with the spreadsheet. They actually put the money in and left it there. I did the math for my wife and I. I figured out, hey, if we put in $200,000 a year, every year compounded at 10% over 40 years, it's an extra $88 million. Sat down, I was like, wow. That's not complicated. Not easy. It's not easy to just hack away most people's, full off salary per year. It's not easy to do, but it's not complicated. It's very simple. So I said, okay, what's the discipline? What are the behaviors? What are the habits we would need to have in place that would allow us to stay consistent with that commitment over long periods of time? You know as well as I do, people staying in great shape mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, it's not complicated. It's a commitment of doing little things consistently over very long periods of time. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine said, let's say you look in the mirror one day and you grab the tire around your stomach and you say, I'm tired of this. I'm ready to shed off this, whatever it is, 10, 12, 15 pounds. Cool. Someone says, I'll give you 24 hours to get it done. You go, 24 hours? Gosh, you can't do anything in just 24 hours. And I go, but I tell you this, I'll give you $10 million cash if you do it in 24 hours. And you go, 10 million bucks, I guess it's worth a shot. I'm going to go for it. So you walk down to the gym, you get there, and 5 a.m. you're on that treadmill. And for the next 4 hours, you're running and sweating, your legs are hurting, your back hurt, then you're doing weights, then you're drinking, hydrating, you're in the sauna, then you're running again, you're doing all this stuff. And 24 hours later, we come in to check on you, you've thrown up, you're exhausted, you're tired, your muscles are aching, your legs spasming, like you're just a hot mess. And I go, what'd you do? You're like, I gave it my all for 24 hours. And I look at you and go, that was stupid. Why'd you try to do 24 hours all at once? The person said you had 24 hours to get in the best shape of your life. Why didn't you do 30 minutes a day for the next 48 days? They look at you and go, well, I didn't think of that. I know. We're in a weird state in history that we think we have to get everything done now. When you could take the same amount of time, 24 hours, spread it over 48 days, 30 minutes a day. And if for 30 minutes a day for the next 48 days you showed up and worked your butt off, I bet you'd see a physical transformation.
And there's a great program out there that has 30-minute workouts that's designed for dedicated men to actually do this.
I've heard of such things. But the thought process, the strategy is what throws people off. Because most people say 24 hours and think it has to happen consecutively. And they go, no, no, I have 24 complete hours. How do I divide those up over a longer period of time to get the consistency needed to get a result that actually is sustainable, not just attainable?
Yeah, if you dose that out with the work periods and the recovery periods, and you, I mean, and you can apply that to your relationships. You can't fix your relationship in a day, but you can dedicate half an hour a day to meaningful conversation with your partner. You can compound your money the same way.
I think it's hilarious. I wish I could screen share. I'd show you a calendar of the entire, let's just say, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., 12 hours of the day. And if I turned the whole calendar blue and I took one 30-minute section per day and turned it pink, and I drew a little pink line across, and the whole thing's blue except for this one little pink line. And I said, if that's all you dedicated to your health was that little 30 minutes a day, how do you think you would do? And they're like, well, you'd probably struggle a little. It'd be better than nothing, but probably struggle. Cool. If that's all you had to focus on, your love of your life, how do you think you'd do? Probably struggle a little. For some reason, it becomes apparent that you need to create space for things that matter to you. But for some reason, we don't. We cram everything with everything else, all the noise of our life, the busyness. And then we hope that if we just, stick something in for 30 minutes, it's magically going to change everything. Now, I'll tell you this. If you're doing zero and all of a sudden you add 30 minutes, it'll be life-changing. But if all you give it forever is 30 minutes, you're going to get a wake-up call eventually. You need to consistently expand the space to create the time for what matters most. I call it the core four: health, relationship, career, and wealth. Are you creating space in your life for the most important parts? People say, well, I don't have time. I go, cool, pull out your phone, go to that little widget in the app that tells you how much time you spend on each app every day, and see which app you could spend a little less time on. That's all you did. Take
Well,
60 minutes out of your TikTok time and watch how much more you can revive your relationship or tighten up your health or start to invest and grow your wealth. Just take it away from TikTok. Take it away from the other things. You tell me, I don't do that stuff. You lie about other things too. Show me your app.
over the years, I've coached clients, and when you suggest that they track something or that they measure things and get granular, which I really appreciate, they feel like they're boxed in, they feel like they're crammed, and now they feel like they're robotic, and they don't just enjoy life, and they're not intuitive, and they're not flowing anymore.
That's okay. Not everyone wants to go to the Olympics. Not everyone wants a gold medal. You don't have to. It's a choice. I always tell people working with me is like showing up to Olympic training camp. You got to want to be here.
But I don't need to track everything to make it. There's an example of a guy that made it without tracking every detail. There's this example of a guy that made it without tracking.
That's great. There's one person who wins a gold medal, and there's a lot of people who have a memory were there. And the people who have the memory were there were considered the best in the world. They weren't average. I think, in all honesty, we should have one average person in every sport in the Olympics just so we can see how much of a difference the actual athletes are compared to average humans. I mean, you imagine Usain Bolt takes off and
Yeah.
he's so much faster than the best athletes on earth. Then there's like Phyllis or Phil running down, 6 minutes later, he comes across the finish line. Not 6 minutes, maybe, it takes them 2 minutes where everyone else finished in 70 seconds. Like it's just a different category of life. And so when you said I get to work with a lot of great people, I work with people who are committed to being the best at what they do. I don't I don't get to deal with a lot of people who are okay with average. That's not what we're interested in. If you were to give an example, I always ask people, if you were any type of car, what kind of car would you want to be? Most of my clients would say something like an F1 race car. I go, cool. People who generally aren't my clients would consider themselves to be a Chrysler minivan. Awesome. It's great. It's useful. Lots of utility. Wonderful, wonderful car. Not my focus.
In the last year, the last, I don't know, 5 years, is there anything that you've shifted your thinking about or changed your mind about?
All
With
kinds of stuff.
coaching, with life, with investing, with uh, media? Anything come to mind?
Stuff I've changed my mind on. Um, Nothing that comes to mind specifically.
In the last, I think it's been a year or so since you did an immersive meditation course. Um, how's that going? I remember we spoke a few months ago and we talked a lot about. I appreciate where you're coming from because you always start with this spot that's grounded in reality. And then from there, it's okay, what can we do with what we know? Um, what do we know about cutting edge meditation right now? And what have you discovered in your practice recently?
Yeah. So with that, none of it's new. I think there's something funny that happens in the world is someone comes up with usually a different format of presenting something that's been around for a very long time. And so with that, there's nothing new about it. Transformation happens when we're in resonance. Resonance is something we're extremely familiar with in the performance, medical, neuroscience world. Heart math has been around many, many, many years. And so creating a space that can hold that environment, allow people to drop into resonance for extended periods of time, always been there.
What
Now,
is what is resonance? What is heart math for the guys that are listening?
um, it's a book worth reading. There's a book literally called Heart Math, and it talks about frequency and rhythms between our heart and our brain. And resonance is when we get in sync, when our heart and our brain are in the same rhythm. So there's breath patterns that can take you there. There's meditations that can take you there. There's all kinds of access points that can move you into that place. And then the key is, can you practice staying in that space? I have a friend who wrote a book. I'm trying to see if it's here. I think it's called Heart, Breath, Mind. Dr. Leah Lagos. She talks about breath work, biofeedback, neurofeedback, and how it all works together. She works with some of the top hedge fund, NFL coaches, athletes, all the same people I work with. And specifically, she works with them on biofeedback on how to help them regulate their nervous system. Think of a gas pedal and a brake pedal. Your heart rate variability. Can you step on the gas and get things to accelerate? And can you step on the brake and get yourself to deregulate? Can you do both at will? There's some people who can only accelerate, they can only amplify, but they don't know how to cool down. There's some people who can only deregulate, but they don't know how to amplify. You need both pedals to really expand your performance. And so we look at these concepts, all of it's been around a really long time. The only difference is now you have people running ads trying to pitch and convince you to come to the event where they can share the magic with you. Back in the day, you used to have to fly to Tibet, take a train into the mountains, hike to far off and hidden temples, knock on the door, and be told, no, you're not ready. Wait outside for 6 months. And you wait outside for 6 months preparing so that you value what they're about to share with you. And then they share ancient wisdom with you in the temple that would then give you access to these tools. That's how people used to get access to this stuff. Nowadays, you can YouTube it and get access to most of the outline of the basics on how this stuff works. And so the challenge is people don't value it as much because they didn't have to work as hard to go get it. It's becoming more readily available, but it's always been there. It's just the format we receive it has changed dramatically. The good news is more people are getting easier access to it. The bad news is because it's easier, people don't value it as much.
Yeah, you see that a lot with almost anything now. But how do you it reminds me of when you're trying to find who, not how. How do you identify, what is to bet, what is the right or the most aligned meditative process for a given person?
It's a tool. So, how do you know when to use a hammer? It's the same process. It's the same thought process. Well, a hammer is used with a nail. Cool. What if I have a bunch of screws? Well, you don't use a hammer with those. You use a screwdriver. Well, what if I have a bolt? Well, that you use a wrench for. These things are plain and obvious if we're talking about screws, bolts, and nails. The more consistent space and time you have in the performance world, specifically coaching, the quicker your brain can tell the difference between a screw, a nail, and a bolt, and which tool is required to assist in this specific situation. Meditation, breath work, all these things are tools. And so it's sitting down and realizing, what are we working with? And what's the most effective tool in this moment under these specific circumstances and situations?
And the first question tends to be, what is your outcome? What are you trying to achieve here? I just want to reiterate
Yeah,
that.
totally. And the challenge is people watch something like this and they'll go, oh, this is a bunch of esoteric, fluffy stuff. Call me. Bring a specific result you're trying to figure out, and I'll help map out a strategy on how to get it. It's not complicated. I had someone one time, a client who was talking to someone else about coaching, and they were like, do you think it's really worth your time or money? And he was like, absolutely. And he goes, truthfully, with all the time and money you put into this, what have you actually gotten in return? And I took a screenshot. This was a gentleman who was much younger. Let me see if I have it real quick. I'll read you word for word what it said. Um, One second. That's not it. So this guy was writing a message to this guy named David. He said, coaching is the sole reason why I stopped drinking alcohol. It's literally the only and sole reason why I stopped drinking was because of working in this coaching. Also, it's the same reason I stopped drinking, taking sleeping aids that were unhealthy. I never had a job on my own before I started coaching in a one on one setting. I was able to get multiple jobs on my own, not through family connections or anything special, but because of the work we were doing. Coaching did a lot for me, and I'm wildly grateful that it helped me turn my life around. And so, if I sat with most people, are either of those things technically really difficult or unsolvable? No. Quitting alcohol, lots of people choose to do it. It's hard, but they do it. Getting a job, lots of people go out and do it. It's hard, but they do it. But a person in a specific moment of their life that was stuck on a substance and not able to function in a quality way to keep a job, we had two simple adjustments we made for him, and all of a sudden, the substance is gone. He has a good job. He's making money. Everything's working. That's not my specialty. He just happened to be someone who reached out who was having a tough time. We helped him make two adjustments in his habits and strategy, and all of a sudden, no more alcohol, job, making money, life is getting better. So it's little adjustments. It's tactical things we make adjustments and we see measurable changes. My actual sweet spot, business owners, we have a female run consulting firm that was making $500,000 a year. We started working together and we've scaled them 2,600% in the last 3 years. It's phenomenal. We're able to do that, get measurable results. It's not fluffy feel good stuff. It's actually adjusting each lever one at a time to see measurable differences.
Can I ask you a couple fun questions? I call them rapid fire,
Sure.
although they don't have to be too rapid. Um, and these are just for fun. What was your favorite food when you were a kid?
Everything.
Everything. If you had to pick one meal,
I consumed everything as a child. I was 5'9", 225 pounds going into high school.
wow.
So I consumed everything.
All right, if you could have a meal,
I'm not saying that was a good idea. I'm just saying that's what I was dialed in for at 15. Everything. If there was a plate with food on it, I would consume it without much thought
you were just that hungry all the time.
all the time.
Wow. And I mean,
My
that's
best friend and I used to both order an extra large double cheese pizza on a Friday night, watch the basketball game, and then go to bed. A girl called me one time in high school when I was, I don't know, 15, 16 years old. She was like, "Hey, do you want to come to a party?" And I was like, "Are you ridiculous? I have basketball in the morning." And I hung up on her. A few years later, I wish girls would have called. But at that stage of life, it was food, basketball, and friends. That's all that existed in my world. So I ate everything. I would not recommend it. It took me years to fix that, but that was my meal plan at that stage of life.
well, if you could eat a meal, any meal, as big as you want, with any person, dead or alive, who would it be?
My wife. I like hanging out with my wife. She's my favorite person. Um, and I drive her nuts, but I eat the same thing all the time now. I just eat broccoli, rice, and salmon. So
Yeah.
it's same fuel, works for my body, and I'd have a meal with her.
Over the years, you probably read a couple books. Which one impacted you the most?
Lots of books. Um, Categorically speaking, relationships. There's a book called The Amazing Development of Men that was wonderful. In Sync with the Opposite Sex is another book. Women Unlock the Mystery. That was a great one. In wealth building, I think Rich Dad Poor Dad, playing the cash flow board game, really laid the right foundation in my mind of just understanding how to think like an investor and approach deals that way and understanding cash flow.
See, I was playing
Business wise,
I was playing the board game with cash flow, and it was a lot to write down. So I actually found there's a computer game where it does all the math for you very quickly. You can run through it much faster.
yeah. Um, Business wise, there's a great book called The Road Less Stupid. It's wonderful for business. Investing wise, there's a book called The Greatest Thing Illuminated by Howard Marks. There's tons of amazing books out there. I read lots and lots and lots of books.
I had a client in here this week, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna have Jairek on the podcast," and he said, "Ask him what podcast does he listen to?"
I don't listen to podcasts to be honest.
Not a lot. Some more books on tape.
Yeah.
All right. Last type question here. Um, if you're gonna work out and you want to get pumped up, what's your first go-to song, or what have been some in the past that you've liked?
I like soundtracks from movies. So I don't. Hans Zimmer is probably one of my favorite conductors or composers there. Um, he does wonderful, wonderful soundtracks. But I personally like the soundtracks that they do for the movie scores. I love downloading those and just picking my favorite songs from different movies and putting it all together.
Any songs? Which movies? Because I know we play the Rocky soundtrack every Friday in class. I try to surprise the guys with one song every week.
So there's a Spotify channel I have. I'll just go top to bottom. So Magical Fantasy by Dimitri, and I can't even say his last name. Tessa from Transformers. Um, Tears Are Becoming a Sea by M83. Arrival to Earth by Steve Jamblowski. Autobots. Back to the Future by the Auto at Time Orchestra. Um, Main title James Horner by Apollo 13. Mystery Man, Chinese characters. I don't know how to read that. Drink Up My Hearties, Yo-Ho, Pirates of the Caribbean by Hans Zimmer, Journey of Discovery, Elephant Music, Test Drive from How to Train a Dragon by John Powell, Battlefield 1, I can't say this, Jonas something. Um, Lots of soundtracks from movies, shows, games. They're really great.
That makes sense. I'm gonna have to start playing with those more. Oh, all right, let's wrap it up here. Before we go, if someone's on the fence, if someone's thinking about making a change in their life, and they just don't believe that they can do it, what's one thing they can do? What's the next step? What can kick them over the fence to get on the other side?
I mean, I was taught growing up it's either inspiration or desperation. So either they're going to get around somewhere that's so much better than what they're experiencing, and they'll go, shoot, I want a piece of that. And they'll go after it, or desperation. Things are going to fall apart and you're going to hit rock bottom so damn hard that you're going to look up and have no other way to go. And you're going to be inspired to do whatever it takes to make the change in your life. Sad part is most people wait for desperation. So most people don't change anything in their health until their doctor tells them one more heart attack and you're done. Like it is what it is. I tend to catch people. I help people who are in that struggle. Just shoot them an Instagram message and they'll message ask me for something. I'll just give them some tips. But I catch people who are inspired who want to figure out how in the world do I do what they're doing? How in the world do I get faster, better, stronger, quicker? What do I need to do to step up? And that's where I tend to come in and showing people strategically how to make those adjustments, and they take off like rocket ships.
Wow, awesome. Jarek, it was an honor to have you on today. Thank you so much. Where can we find you? Jarek's busy.
Just my website, jarekrobbins.com.
Cool. All right, man. Thanks a lot.
Welcome.